Welcome to 10-Minute Table Talk. My name is Pastor James Lee from the Church at Bethel's Family, and I just wanted to talk to you this morning about being a steward of God's grace. All of us know that it took God's grace to save us, and it takes God's grace to keep us as we walk down this road to sanctification. But it doesn't seem as though a lot of us, or most of us, understand that it calls for us to be stewards of God's grace, to continue to show grace to others, the same grace that God has shown to us. Let's take a look at 1 Peter chapter 4, beginning in verse 8. It says, above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Most of us point out and look at other people's faults and other people's sins and say, well, one thing, at least I'm not as bad as that person. Or when someone sins or transgresses against us, we hold that against them as some sort of pressure that needs to be put on them, or we hold it against them as an offense eternally, where we don't forgive and we don't give in. But that's not what God did to us. For the Bible clearly states that we were at enmity, that we were enemies of God and enemies with God. The Bible clearly states that we were once transgressors, that we were once trespassers and dead in our sins. That while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, is what it says in Romans chapter 5. So that grace that God used to cover us is the same grace that we need to use to cover others. Who has wronged you? Who has gone against you? Who has hurt you? Be it physically, be it emotionally. Who has hurt you and who have you not forgiven? For it says this to all believers, to keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. What's going on here is the Christians at Asia Minor, here these churches in Asia Minor, they are being persecuted right now. They've been kicked out of Rome by Nero. So now to call yourself a Christian is a death sentence. You'll be martyred. At the very least, you'll be ostracized. So they're asking, how can we live in this society when people are taking our belief system and people are taking all that we have said that we believe in and using it against us? And they've turned in on each other and said, how can we continue to live as Christians when that's the thing that can cause us death? Well, Peter returns back here. He says, above all, keep loving one another and keep loving earnestly, for love covers a multitude of sins. Love covers those sins that are committed against you. Love covers those transgressions when people persecute you, when people hate you for no apparent reason except for you are you. You got to keep loving and keep loving earnestly. Why? Because love covers a multitude. A multitude is many, many sins. No matter how many times someone sins, if you continue to love, love will cover that sin. Love will abound further than sin will ever abound. So we're to show grace and be stewards of God's grace. Be ones who manage and ones who dispense God's grace through and to humanity through ourselves, through our actions. Look what it says after that. It says, show hospitality to one another. This is verse 9. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. It means lend a hand and help someone, not out of compulsion, but because you have earnest love, because love covers that multitude of sins. Sometimes there are people who have moved and done some things against us. Sometimes there are people who have gone and said some things about us, and then they turn and ask us for something. If we're going to be stewards of God's grace, not only do we show them hospitality, but we do it without grumbling. We make sure that we show the love of Christ in our everyday life. Why? Because we may be the only Christ that someone sees that day. And to give someone a hand that has wronged you, and to lend a hand to someone that has hurt you, is a way to show who Jesus is and how he has affected your life. How Jesus has shown you grace is the same way you need to show grace to others. For love covers a multitude of sin. As each of us has received this gift, use it to serve one another. This gift is the gift of grace. This gift is the gift of the unmerited favor of God, where we didn't deserve salvation, but God gave it to us. Everything that we hold against others, we've committed against God. Every sin, every transgression, every iniquity. if you've lied, if you've cheated, if you've stolen, if you held anger in your heart, you sinned against God. And God still covered you with grace. God still covered you with love. So why can't we extend the same grace, extend the same love, extend the same hospitality, and serve one another? How can we love one another earnestly? By serving and by giving grace and by showing hospitality. We can't look at the sin. We can't even look at the sinner. What we need to do is look at the grace, dispense the grace, love one another earnestly, because love covers a multitude of sins. Thank you and have a great day.